Hello.
I'm Mario. New Masechta Horyus. Horu Bezdin Lavor Alachas Mikol Mitzvah B'Torah. The Sanhedrin, by mistake, paskined that, for example, chalev from this butcher is permitted, even though chalev is prohibited. The halacha yachid v'asar shoygig al piyah. Based on the psak of Bezdin, an individual went and ate a piece of chalev. Bein sha'asu v'asar imem, whether the Bezdin themselves did it with him, bein sha'asu v'asar achrein, whether they did it after bein sha'asu v'asar potter. Whether or not, even if they didn't do it, but he did it, in all these cases, he does not have to bring a korban, his own korban chatas, which normally you bring if you violate something which is korets. He relied on the psak of Bezdin. But Haru Bezdin v'yoda echad mehen sheto. If one of the judges know that they had made a mistake, even though the majority was against him, O Talmid v'hu roi b'atzmo lo, there was a Talmid who was capable of being given smicha v'halach v'asa al pien, and he did the way Bezdin paskin, bein sha'asu v'asu imoin, bein sha'asu v'asu achren, bein la'asu asar is a chayiv. If one of them knew that they had made a mistake, then they would not be required to bring a par helam davar shel tzibur, but the individual would have to bring his own kakatas. He was relying on his own das. Ze'aklal hatol ba'atzmo chayiv. If he relies on his own das, he's chayiv to bring the korban. Hatol b'bezdin, if he's relying on the psak of bezdin, he's potter. Amar Shmuel olamein bezdin chayoven ad sheyor melahem mutar natem. That Bezdin is only chayiv to bring a korban helam davar if they say it is permitted to you. But Rav Dimi min Ardom rad sheyor melahem mutar natem lasois. It's not just enough to say mutar matem. They have to say mutar matem to do. My time lefishalo nigma. By saying mutar matem, that's not the final psak. They have to say you are permitted to do it. You have a Zaken Mamre. You have one of the Dayanim who goes against the Psak in Sanhedrin. He goes back to his town. And he continues to teach according to his opinion, Potter. However, if he makes the Psak and says you're permitted to do it, then he's Chayiv Misa. A woman, her husband doesn't come back from China, and one witness comes back and says he was dead, and Bezdin paskin that she could get married. The halcha of a kilkala, she doesn't get married; she just has nus. Chayeves bekorban, she has to bring a korban. Shlo hitir lo linase. Their hoira was to get married. Amravina fananim tamina. Haru Bezdin lavar lachas mikol mitzvah b'Torah. Then, and somebody did it, they'd have to bring a korban, and the people would be potter. Sulo midi, we don't have to bring other examples. Iged Yamri, Amar Shmuel, ein Bezdin chayavin at sheyom lehem mutar matem lasos. It's not just enough to say mutar matem; they have to say mutar matem lasos. Rav Dimi Nadar afilu mutar matem is nigmar without lasos. But the Mishnah is not like Rav Dimi, because it says by the Zaken Mamre, Chazan le'iro v'shana limei k'derech shlemei potter, her lasso is chayiv. So you see, it's not enough to say mutar matem. You have to say mutar lasos. And Amar Rabba Valod Nanachi, Haru lo Bezdin lenose. If Bezdin allowed the woman to get married based on witnessing one witness for halcha v'kilkala, she didn't get married, but she went and committed znus. Chayeves bekorban shlo yitiru lo lenose. The psak was for her to get married. And Amar Ravina Valod Nanachi, Haru Bezdin lavar lachos mikol mitzvah b'Torah. So the person who eats chaylev based on that psak is potter from korban. So they have to, it's lasois. It's not just mutar matel. V'sulo midi. Halach hayachid v'asar shogig al piyam. Bezdin paskin that this meat, this fat from this butcher is permitted fat, and it turns out that they were wrong, and people ate the chaylev based on their psak, so the individual doesn't have to bring a korban. V'nisni v'asa al piyam. Why didn't the Mishnah say? And they did based on what they said. Shoygeg lamali. We know it's a shoygeg. Amarava shoygeg is lasui, another case. Haru bezin shechelev mutter. They felt, Bezin made a psak that this chelev is permitted chelev. V'nischalef lo chelev b'shumen v'achlo. And this guy mixed up chelev with permitted fat. He thought he was eating permitted fat. V'achlo, that's also potter. Meaning al piyam manish. If a shoygeg is when he made a mistake, because like he switched, he thought he was eating permitted fat and it was really prohibited fat. In both cases, he brings, he would still be potter from bringing a korban. Because even the permitted fat, it was made in error. The prohibited chaylev was in error. Vikadiyami Amarava. Shoygeg is al piyam hu shepotter. If he does something because they paskin wrong, that's when he's potter. But if he thought he was eating permitted fat and he ate prohibited fat, he's chayiv to bring a korban chatas. Because his shoygeg was not tolo in Bezdin, it was his own mistake. Milsa de pshita le Rava, that which was simple for Rava, kamaboy le Rav Bar Chama, was in doubt for Rav Bar Chama, the boy Rav Bar Chama. Hoyru bezin shechelev mutter. The Sanhedrin paskin that chelev is permitted. V'nis chalev lo b'shumin v'achlo. And that chelev got mixed up with shumin and he ate it. Ma, Amar Rav Toshma. Halach yachid v'asa shogig al piyam. It's when the yachid does a shogig based on their psak that he's potter. But why does it have to shogig al piyam lamali? Isn't it lav lasu yishor bezin shechelev mutter v'nischach b'shumin v'achlo potter? It's to add the second case. The Gemara says, who says Dilma shogig al piyam hu shepotter? Aval nischalav v'chelev b'shumin v'achlo chayiv. And maybe it is chayiv in that case. Ikedi amri amar Rava Toshma. Halach yachid v'asa shogig al piyam. The private individual went ahead and followed the psak of Bezdin. We say it's potter. My lav shogig al piyam hu shepotter. It's only when an individual follows the psak of Bezdin he's potter. But we're going to be medaikav and nischalal of chelev b'shumin v'achlo chayiv. Maybe that case would be chayiv. No. Dilma o shogeg o piyam. You get two choices. It'll be a case of shogeg where he mixes up permitted and prohibited fat, or he follows the psak of Bezdin. Now, this question that we've been dealing with is already beplukta an earlier machloikas amiroim, the following. Hoyru bezin shechelev mutter. V'nischalav lo chelev b'shumin v'achlo. Bezin paskin that chelev is permitted. And this guy thought he was eating permitted fat and he ate chelev. Rav Amar potter. Because he followed the psak of Bezdin. Bezdin said it was permitted, they made a mistake. Rav Yochanan Amar chayiv. Because he didn't really follow what they said. He thought he was eating permitted fat, he had nothing to do with their psak. Now, Meisver, will ask a question, Rav Yochanan. The pasuk says, "Im nefesh achas techte b'shkaga me'ama aretz me'asosa achas mimitzvos Hashem asher lo taseh v'Hashem." What's the me'ama aretz coming to be made? Prat lemumar. someone who doesn't even acknowledge this prohibition, and he brings a korban chatas on a shogeg, but we're not mekabel his korban because it's really considered like a mazid. Rav Shimon ben Yosi oimer mishum Rav Shimon. For a mummer, we don't need einot tzarch. We don't need this proof. Hareu oimer asher lo sasena bishgaga. If someone did it b'mezid, v'asham ohoida alav chatasa, it's only hashav, somebody who has regret miyadiyaso that he has to bring a korban, maybe korban al shigaso. But shaloishav miyadiyaso, he thinks he's not choizer b'tshuva, he's a mummer. Eino maybe korban al shigaso. However, v'imisa, if it's correct about mixing up chelev with shumin, haloishav miyadiyaso. He didn't know he ate chelev. He thought he's eating permitted fat. So that's not a case of charata. So he should be potter too. On Rav Papa. And why did Rav Yochanan say chayiv? On Rav Papa, k'sav Rav Yochanan. Even the misyada lulu beidina hadribuhu. Once Bezdin knows that they made a mistake, they will go back on their hoira. V'hunami hoder bei. The yachid will also go back and do tshuva that he ate chelev that was permitted falsely by Bezdin. So we're calling him shav miyasa karina bei v'chayiv. And once he's informed of the mistakes that were made, he will have regret. Amar Rava, even though Rav said that it was potter, and that his chait was told by Bezdin, moide Rav she'eno mashlim l'rov tzibur. He does not, that specific guy does not tip the scales from 50 to 51% if Klal Yisrael, because Klal Yisrael, the majority has to do it in order for Beis Din to bring a Parlam Davar Shel Tzibur. It's only when the Rav Tzibur does it. But this man who thought he was eating shuman instead of prohibited fat does not add to that. My time, really, they have two different kinds of shogeg. The rest of the people are shogeg because they followed the psak of Beis Din. He's a shogeg because he thought he was eating permitted fat. It's not one specific type of shogeg. You can't add them up. Then the Mishnah said, "Bein she'asu v'asu imon," whether the Beis Din did the aver with him or not, he's potter. Lamale lemisli kolani. Why did the Mishnah have to mention all of these? Bishma Reisha, Shaloi Zuav. Not only this, but this also. It's not only a case if they did and they did, he's potter, but even if they did after him, he's potter. And not only that, Elaseifa de l'chiyuva, the end of this Mishnah, which said a case where he's chayiv, ipchem boile, it should have been just reversed. You should have started with the case which was very pashut, when they didn't do it, only he did. If they're going to do lo zuvav zuktani, so in a chanami, the seifa is a different structure. Zuv ein tzarach lomer zuktani. It's this, and you certainly don't have to say this. Period. The yada echad mehem shato otamid roy loyra. The Mishnah said that if Sanhedrin made a mistake, but one of the dayanim knew that they made a mistake, then there's no ptur. Amar Rava Yitzchak, we need to teach this. Both the Talmud Aroy Loy and one of the Dayon. Tzagadat Chamina Anamili Gomer V'Sovir. That's somebody who learned and who knows how to paskin. But Misha Gomer V'Loy Sovir, a Talmud who doesn't have both skills, maybe he wouldn't be a chiyuv. Lo. So the Tana told us that there is a chiyuv korban. Armalei Abai Loy Ra. If he's roy Loy Ra Gomer V'Sovir Mashma, then he clearly has both skills. Amr Leisa Rava responded, Anachi Kamina. Imeahi, from the halacha Rishoina talking about the dayan, Havimina Hanim Meli Gomer V'Sovir. Only somebody who has both of a Gomer V'Loy Sovir Lo. So Tana roy Loy Ra. So it had to mention a Talmud even if roy Loy Ra. And Mimishni is Seira. from this extra Mishnah, Shafilu Gomer V'loy Savir, even if he knew how to learn but didn't know how to paskin. O Savir V'loy Gomer, he knows how to paskin, but he hasn't learned everything. He would still be in the category that if they did it, they'd be chayv in a court. Now, what does it mean, roy loy ro? Talmid roy loy ro. Kigon man. Amarava kigon Shimon ben Azai v'Shimon ben Zoma. These were gedolei ador, but they were never given smicha. That's why we don't call him Rav Shimon ben Azai, Rav Shimon ben Zoma. Amalei Abai ki hai gavna mezidu. So he wouldn't be a shoygig. He'd be he's an Adam Gadol. He shouldn't have made a mistake. And if he paskined wrongly, he's amazing here. Should be potter from korban. So ula tameich had Tanya ba'asoisa achas. Sheyachid ha'oisem pi atzmo chayv. A yachid who doesn't follow Besdin, he eats something that he thinks is permitted. He eats it. He's chayv. But by Ros Besdin potter. Now, how does this work, Ketzah? Haru Besdin shechelif mutter. Sanhedrin went to a certain plant, and they paskin all of this chelev is not prohibited. Chelev is permitted. And it turns out they were wrong. But no delechod me'am shato. One of the dayonim finds out that they made a mistake. Oh, Talmud Yosef Ifneim v'roy lo iro. Or it was a Talmud sitting in front of them, but could have had smicha, Kagon Shimon ben Azai, who made a mistake and did al pi Besdin. Yachol yehi potter. Talmud lomer ba'asoy soy achas. It's a yachid ha'ois al pi atzmo chayiv. But because the individual dayan or Talmud was passing for himself, he wasn't listening to Besdin. But only a yachid who listens by Ras Besdin, only he is potter. So if you're talking about a Shimon ben Azai and Adam Gadol, heichim ishkachasla, how would he ever be considered a shogeg? We just said he would always be considered amazing. Kigon shiyada, the asr. That which Sanhedrin paskin was leheter, he knew it was prohibited. He made a mistake that there's a mitzvah to listen to chachamim. Now, perhaps there's a mitzvah to listen to them even when they make a mistake. Even when they made a mistake. But if he knows for sure that they're not correct, maybe lididi nami, tov b'mitzvah lishmo divrei chachamim, and maybe that's why they're chayiv in korban. Zeh hakla. HaTorah ba'atzmo chayiv. If he relies on his own psak and he made a mistake, yeah, I can't come. What does Zeh hakla come to include? Lasur mai. That wasn't mentioned. Lasui mevayet bohira. Somebody who always makes fun and rejects the Hoyraz Besdin, will always only listen to himself. So Tolba Bezdin, when we say Tolba Bezdin, your potter, what does that come to include? Lasui Horo Bezdin v'yodu shetov v'chazru behem. Bezdin paskin, they knew that they made a mistake. But they went back. So how about Ektani law? In the next mission, it's going to say that. So Tni v'hadar mefarish. And Echanami, the next mission will be mefarish. This is in the structure of the Mishnah, sort of referring to the next Mishnah. Amir Amar Shmuel. Zu Div Rabbi Yehuda. The Mishnah that any Yachid who did like Hoyraz Bezdin's potter, that's only Rabbi Yehuda. But Chachamim oimrim, Yachid she'aso by Raz Bezdin chayiv. It's only going to be if the 51% of the Jewish people do it, then they will be potter from korban. But an individual in Klal Yisrael who eats chaylev because they said it was permitted and it turns out it was false, he has to bring a korban chatas. And my Rabbi Yehuda, what's Rabbi Yehuda? The Tanya. Im nefesh achas techte bishkaga basoisa. So we have shloisha miyutim, achas, bishkaga, and basoisa. So ha'oisa b'pi atzmo chayiv, if he follows his own psak incorrectly and he eats chaylev, he has to bring a korban. If he follows the Rosh Bezdin potter.
Ernie, let me ask you a question. How come if the Beis Din makes a ruling, right, and then the minority of people they go eat the chaylev? Why is the Beis Din not chayiv? Why are they chayiv a korban?
They're chayiv a korban if 51% of Klal Yisrael violates the rule, then they bring a par helam dover shel tzibur. Until 51%, each individual still would bring his own korban chatas for eating the chaylev improperly. Even though they paskined it, because
but we learned before in the first Mishnah, the Beis Din paskined, and you do something, the Beis Din brings a korban, and then you're potter.
Only 50%, only 51%.
Mishnah doesn't say that at the beginning. Mishnah doesn't say that. It doesn't say 50%.
No, but that's our Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda, but the Chachamim say, our Mishnah said the Yachid is patur if he ate the chaylev that the Bezdin Paskin was chaylev. But that's only, the Chachamim say Yachid sha'asa by Rosh Bezdin chayiv. And there's only going to be a patur according to the Chachamim if it's 51%.
What's the point? 51% didn't.
51% eat the chaylev.
And then you're
then the Bezdin has to bring this special korban called par helam dover shel tzibur.
I get it. But the Beis Din paskin, I don't understand it. The Beis Din paskin,
Right,
the Beis Din doesn't.
They paskin wrongly, but and then
And
the end 48% of Jews ate that chaylev. Each one of them have to bring their own korban chatas.
Very difficult to understand. They don't have to do anything, and the poor innocent people who have to go buy.
Because it's par helam dover shel tzibur, and it's not considered a tzibur until 51%.
49% didn't the individuals bring it.
Correct.
So they have to pay money because the Beis Din made a mistake. Sounds like the court in America. Yeah, it's crazy.
Correct. We paskin like the Chachamim. Hoyru Bezdin bishkoga, v'asu rak miyut hakol al piyah, and less than 50% did it. Bezdin pturim, v'oisum b'nei amiyut shechatu chayovin lahavi kol echad korban chatas. Black letter law.
I get it. It's just hard to understand. So it reminds me is when politicians do something wrong, they change the law. Okay.
Now, my Rabbanon, like Walter wants to know, where does the sheet of the Chachamim come from? The Tanya. Here's a Baraisa. Abron Horyus, Daf Beis Amud Beis. We've learned so far that if Beis Din paskins that chaylev is permitted, and 49% of Klal Yisrael eat it, each individual has to bring a korban chatas. The Beis Din doesn't have to do anything. If 51% of Klal Yisrael ate that chaylev, then the individual people are potter from korban, and Beis Din has to bring a special korban called par elam davar shel tzibur. That's the sheet of the Chachamim, and we're about to elucidate that shita. The Tanya. Adayin ani oimer miud kol shechatu. Less than 50% is called miud kol. Chayovin. They have to bring a korban for their shoygig. She'ein bezin meviim al yedeim par el al rov kol shechatu. Shein bezin meviim al yedeim par Rov kol shechatu yu p'turin. In that sense, 51% would be potter. Sharei Bezdin mevin al yedei empar. And the Beis Din will bring their korban. And how do we learn it? From Talmud Lomer me'amo aretz. Afilu ruba v'afilu kula. Now, b'mai, what are we talking about? Ilema b'shigas ma'isa, meaning the people did a mistake, but not because of Eroz Bezdin. So, Bezdin Shelo Bara, what do you mean? Why would you call it Bezdin Shelo Bara? Bezdin Ma'av, Bezdin's not involved. We're talking about those people who made a mistake. Shelo Bara's Bezdin Mi Maisu. Shelo Bara. What is Bezdin doing here? So we're not talking about a case where people made a mistake. Ella, the Hoira. Bezdin went to a plant. They paskin that this chaylev they thought was permitted, but it was really prohibited, and everybody ate it through a psak. That's it wasn't b'shigas psak. It was they made a mistake in action. So we have to change the losh of the b'raisa. Miut kol shechatu b'shigas ma'isa chayavim. If the minority of the tzibur does an action because they did a ma'isa b'shogeg incorrectly, they're going to be chayiv. Shein bezden mevin al yedei par boira. In such a case, Beis will not bring a part. But hey, chayovim. Those that did a ma'isa through an improper hoira, they would bring a korban. As long as it's a miut kahal. Yachol rov tzibur sha'asu b'shigas ma'isa. I might think that even if you have more than 51% you Peturim by Shigas Maisa, like I think it's permitted Chayla, but it's really prohibited. That's a Shigas Maisa. Sure, maybe I would think in that case as well. That it's only when it's a shoygig because of Hoiroz Bezdin that the people will be potter. That's the sheet of the Chachamim. Amrav Papi Mimai Dilma Lohain Velo Bezdin. Maybe in a case where the minority of the Kahal violated the din because of a faulty psak, like Walter's thinking, maybe nobody should bring a korban. Not those that relied on Bezdin, and not Bezdin because it was only a miut. And that makes more sense to Walter. Walter was having a problem with this whole din. And Rav Papa follows Walter. Rav Papa is asking, no one should bring a korban. So why is the Tana being mechadesh? That even if more than 51% did an Aveira, but not B'Hoiros Bezah, but rather B'Shigas Ma'isa, they're Chayv a korban, Lav Michlal must mean the miut B'Hoiro Kaimelan de Mechayvu. The opposite case would be the case where less than 50% did B'Hoiro, and yet they're still B'Chayv. Feel B'Hoiro. Afraid to come over Nahed Bereisha miut to the Mechayv. Let the beginning prove the minority people doing Shigas Maisa that are Chayv Korban B'Shigas Maisa, and later on tell me about the majority that do Shigas Maisa, they also have to bring a korban. Elalav, midolo mahader, al miutu mechayav, and the fact that it didn't go back on the minority that mechayav b'shigas maisa, uvesof mahader al ruba l'chiyuva, but it did talk about the 51% that still have to bring an individual korban if they did it with Shigas Maisa, Shma Mina, Miut Bohiro Chayovim. That's the logical proof that if less than 50% did the Aveira following in erroneous Hoiro of Bezdin, they still have to bring a korban. Kizba V'Se'ira, which is a regular animal that's brought for a korban chatas that you do b'shogeg. V'shaloi boy Rabbi Shtikas Ma'aser Chayav. Now, if they did it because they mistakenly thought it was permitted fat and it turned out to be prohibited fat, that's called not Behoiro, but rather Shigas Ma'aser, you're Chayiv. And you're also Chayiv a korban in that case. Michte, Tervav Stamitna. Now, both of these brises we quoted, they didn't quote the name of a person. It didn't say Chachamim, it didn't say Rabbona. How do you know Mimai de Kamais Rabbi Yehuda Ubaisreis Rabbona? Ema Ibcha. Maybe it's reversed. So, Man Shamis Le Dorsh Mi Ute Ki Hai Gavna. Who do we find that darshans this kind of miut? That's classically Rabbi Yehuda. And tomorrow we'll see how Rabbi Yehuda darshans miut, that they calculated that the Brisa is Rabbi Yehuda because of the methodology. Okay. Tomorrow we could learn Daf at 7 o'clock.